Good morning, everyone, everywhere. We are here now as you are and welcome you. And today I wanted to make a couple of announcements, go over a few things, and that is that we have previously not included anyone listening outside the participants in our email introduction that I send out every week. And we're going to begin to do an introduction per month so that every month has a theme and every month has a focus, and every one of our 3 or 4 discussions during the month can build around that focus and use that to draw from. And I'm going to both read and comment on that and upload it so that anyone out there can listen to it. And it would align with typically the episodes of that month. So February already had up as pre this discussion, which I think is 23. And from now on, it'll just be a monthly note. So that's for everyone out there. Also a reminder, there's no discussion on the last Sunday, so it gives everybody a chance to take a break and to think in relation to having more time in between the discussion and see how everyone is functioning, catch up on either episodes and whatever they're doing in the world without the scheduled interruption, and see if it doesn't allow for a greater sense of perspective. Time tends to offer perspective, and often sitting on those thoughts that we have in the life we call our own can be very helpful to have a little gap between the consistent ritualistic kind of weekly conversation. Anyone can participate in the Zoom conversation. And as much as your listening is a form of participation, because your responses, your reactions, your impulses are all forms of communication, spoken or not, verbally able to be heard or not, are all forms of communication. But anyone out there who would like to be a part of the weekly participation on Zoom is welcome to send an email, and we'll include you in the announcement that will give you a link to that meeting. I've often suggested to watch your thoughts. And I don't mean that as censorship. I simply mean as observers of the present, in the present, thoughts are something we do. They're not something we are. And we can watch our thoughts. We can watch our responses. We can watch our reactions. And they are not only part of the discussion, they're part of our interactive, ongoing, ever-present nature. We're doing that all the time. Everything is interacting all the time within the human realm, within this thing we call human, as though it's distinct from this other realm, which it isn't. But it appears to be, and it feels like it is, and we think it is. So we know you're out there listening, and we appreciate you being here, because that added opportunity to discuss these things openly includes you now, and includes the effects you have on everyone around you that includes us too. So we thank you for that. In terms of what we're talking about, you do not need to understand it. Understanding here is somewhat of the booby prize. But if you can begin to understand that you don't need to understand what you know, that can be very helpful to begin to realize that you have a much greater sense of knowing than your thinking would allow you to think you know, until you begin to introduce thinking to it, and thinking will also agree then very quickly, it's known all along, there was a lot more going on than we were allowing it to witness and experience. So try ideas on, see how they fit, wear them. You don't need to agree with them. You don't have to believe in them. You don't have to have faith in them, trust them, nothing, absolutely nothing. Just try it on. And my experience is that when I consider something and live with it, rather than turn it into an immediate question of why, where, when, and how, which causes doubt, just live with it. I know very quickly that I begin to apply it, and some of the application of it is so natural, it doesn't even occur to me for a month that I've actually begun to implement and engage and have this resource, because the conflict isn't there, and conflict is the abnormality of human experience. Peace and ease is the normality. When I'm at ease and at peace, I don't feel the time that's dragging on. I don't feel all the weight of those things that happen. They just aren't there because they aren't there except to the thinking I'm doing about the things as though they're real and true. That's what causes it, always. The other thing, too, is to talk about your experience. And I suggest this to everyone here. In the time that we have off in between the weekly episodes, sessions, Zoom discussions, and also in between the 2 weeks, if you talk about your experience, you'll learn a couple of things, I think, pretty quickly. One is that you don't have a lot of experience talking openly and honestly about what you're thinking. And that often the thinking tends to be very inflammatory when you simply tell somebody what you're thinking. And people are welcome to react in any way that they want because we are welcome to think anything that we want. And if you allow them that space, there's an ease to it that begins to dissipate some of the hostilities that tend to be reinforced by constantly fighting for the idea as though it's true and real, rather than simply a thought you're having. You do not need to be right to be honest. Talking about what's wrong is as valuable as talking about what is right. And my expectation is that since right is right, and if anything would be known in the universe, it would be what's right. We don't need to talk about that at all. And almost all we ever talk about is what's wrong. Thinking, if we talk about it more because we're going to think about it more, we'll make it more right rather than realize the wrong of it is exactly what we constantly try to make sense out of. But if it's irrational to begin with because it has no basis, what sense are we trying to make out of something but insanity? It's insane to try to make sense out of something that makes no sense. So spending more and more time on it just gives it more credibility as being something worth giving time to, when in fact all it is more thinking about the same problem as though it's real, as though it's distinct.
Hey, Jack, just a quick question from the peanut gallery here. It just occurred to me that every one of us is here for a different reason, I'm sure. Like, we're not all here for the same reason, right? So you're trying to make this great point and you're going off, but it's like somebody, like, we're probably waiting for what we want to hear. Like, I'm here for a reason, everyone's here. Instead of asking, like, what are we trying to get out of this? You're talking about the hypothetical universe to solve the problems, right? Well, we don't even know what the problem is.
Of course, hang tight, though. Hang tight. I'd like to finish the point I started here. And it will address that, Anthony.
Well, what is the point? Like, can you just, what I'm saying is just for
if you'd listen, like, I will explain it. If you're willing.
But I don't want an explanation. I just want a quick bullet point.
Well, then put a pin in your bullet and see if it doesn't come. So the reason we're talking about this in absolute terms, Anthony, is because existence is based on our existence, your existence, where you are is based on absolute principles, and where everyone is, where everything is. And to make believe that that's something that can be pushed aside while focusing on the little things we think are true and real, and that we're going to get all the little things correct,
yes,
is insanity. That's called insanity. That. You know why? Because it's impossible. And emotional sobriety is sane living, just like sobriety is sanity. Second step says, came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Why? Because in the first step, we're insane to think we had power over the idea that we could control and enjoy our drinking with respect to alcoholism. It is insane to think that I can control and enjoy my thoughts when I make believe my thoughts aren't what they are.
Right.
And who I am. I am going to fracture into trillions of different options. And humanity has been doing that for a long time, trying to make believe it's my problem that needs to be addressed, and my reasons that need to be heard, and my excuses that need to be justified. And that's just more and more of exactly the same point that this month's focus is.
I like that. You're getting fired up.
So if we are free to think whatever we want, and we create a sensation of condemnation by thinking we're not thinking what we're thinking and shouldn't be thinking what we're thinking and shouldn't be doing what we're doing, which we're capable of doing, that's just a setup. It's a broadside within our own thinking to make believe that what we're doing isn't what we're doing when what we're doing is always exactly what we're doing.
Yes.
And what that leads to, several things. Gives me the impression I'm not where I belong. So what do I want to be but somewhere else when I'm always where I am? What do I want? Something else when I
Right.
always have what I have.
With someone else,
And I want to be with somebody else, somewhere else, with something else.
As someone else.
But the greater issue here is today, for this month, which I'm a little late in, well, actually, no, what is it, the 5th? It's the beginning. So we actually got this in time. I was working on next week, so I'm thinking ahead. If the
That's
idea
what the craft is about, Jack, thinking ahead.
If the idea is that we are trying to get better, feel better about doing what we're doing that's worse, all we are ever doing is trying harder and harder and harder to stay ahead of the growing problem that's going to grow because we're not paying attention to it. We're paying attention to how we feel about it, but we're not paying attention to what it is that's causing the feeling.
And how do we stop that?
Well, listening would help.
Hey, who's laughing there?
No,
how
not
do we
me.
stop that?
So
how do we stop it? I don't want to listen to 2 hours. I want to know, how do I stop it?
okay, well, if you continue it, I can assure you, you won't. So you're a good example right now of exactly how to continue it. So there's no good reason to use reason as an excuse to appear better than we feel. So it's only sick thoughts that have us try this. This is the addiction attempting, Anthony, constantly to interject, intercede, and resolve the problem, when in fact it's only what you feel about it that you're trying to fix. You're not looking at the problem because
Or
you're
just be
creating.
happy. For me, I realize it's like, whatever it is, if it makes me unhappy, then you're going to be unhappy. But if the biggest problem makes me happy, it's like, okay, I'm really happy. It's what you want. If you want to be unhappy, you could have everything and you're going to be unhappy. If you want to be happy, the world could be falling apart, but you're happy.
So why don't you live by that advice, Anthony?
I did. That's where I'm in France right now. I don't want to be bragging, but it's like, I'm living my dream because of Jack. I am living. It's like, I don't need you. It's like, I just want to know what it is. Let's stop it. Let's do something else. Let's watch TV. Fix the problem.
Well, I can assure you, Anthony, that repeating the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again and expecting somehow it will be different someday is not the answer. That's actually begging the question, which you've done consistently in our discussions and continue to do in the name of.
It was Everett put me up to it. It's Everett.
So continuing.
All right, I'm waiting for Janet to talk. I was thinking Janet was on.
I'm going to continue because I've got a little bit of an outline here that I would like to use as the basis for this discussion.
I apologize.
If what we are doing is creating the problem and constantly trying to fix the symptom, we're only getting better at what is worse. And most human endeavor, most self-help is all about trying to feel better about what's wrong, trying to feel better about what's worse. Exactly. So the old adage that feelings aren't facts both makes and misses a couple of central points. Feelings have no opinions. Feelings are reflections like senses that register raw data. So when I feel bad, I am feeling the sum total of everything that is happening, which largely includes my thinking, because my thinking has a major impact on my experience. And when I'm feeling bad and think bad is something to get away from, I am stuck in that same sick thinking that is thinking what I'm hearing is only what I think, rather than actually what's being said. So when my feelings, by the way, it's interesting that feelings don't tell us they're bad. It's thoughts telling us that they're bad, because feelings don't speak. Feelings simply are offering raw data, raw sensory data. And it's the words we're using that define the bad. Interesting that the words come from thought, and yet our own thinking that's perfectly clear, that's thinking we're thinking something bad, we want to make believe is something to run from and feel better than, which ends up promoting the worst nature, the nature of the problem. Because no disease gets better. If you went to the doctor and he said, you've got 4-stage cancer, and you said, well, I'm going to come back in a year and see if you give me the same diagnosis. Chances are that thing would not get better, whatever it is. Once a disease is taken hold, it's going to grow if it is not properly diagnosed and as a result, properly addressed correctly. We're talking about beginning to correctly address the thinking we're doing that's causing all of the internal struggles, emotional turmoil, inner conflict. There is no conflict in nature or trust in truth and reality. There's none. There's your answer, Anthony. There's nothing wrong.
I was just going to say that's dead wrong. There is conflict in nature. I mean, let's have this a real discussion. You just can't say things that aren't true. There's always conflict. That's what makes the planet's exploding. The Big Bang. I mean, come on.
What's the conflict, Anthony? It's provided us.
You're going to say
there's no conflict. There is no.
Well, then I got to get to that point because I'm
Anthony,
like so far. I'm on the other side.
There's no conflict in doing what things are doing. There's none at all. Planets explode, and it's provided us the chance to be where we are with what we have on a planet that seems to be designed pretty well for our survival.
Well, that's life-changing then, because I always thought that's what made stuff. Conflict.
Life doesn't change, though, Anthony. Only your thoughts about it. So,
Anthony,
in wrapping this up, if I can, feeling better about what is worse only gets us better at denying what's happening. And well-being is very different than trying to feel better all the time, trying to get better all the time. Getting better says, I'm even admitting by saying I want to get better that I'm worse right now. The admission is in the facts of what's happening, which are actual, which is what factual is. If what I'm doing right now gives me an impression that something is wrong, it is the wrong I am thinking that I am getting the impression of first. Doesn't mean there isn't something outside me that's wrong or outside my experience, but nothing's going to have a greater impact on my experience than what I'm thinking about what's happening.
well, I don't understand. I don't understand what you said, that there's no conflict in nature. I agree with.
Yes, red card. You get a red card, Jack.
Well,
Let's have one example.
Everything is interacting
Okay.
Everything is interacting throughout the entire universe.
May I finish what I was going to say?
would imagine.
Conflict by definition is, I want this, and somebody else wants the opposite. I suppose that when a tiger is charging to eat and kill Godzilla, they want different things. So it's conflict there. Yeah.
The Godzilla theory.
No, it's bigger than that, guys. That is like the symptom in relationship to the problem, if that were a problem. You're looking at the literal sense when you have to look at the totality of the whole ecosystem.
Well, we don't have to, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to begin to imagine things.
No, in every world you have
in there. What's interesting, Santiago, Anthony, everything that's changing is interchanging. It's exchanging everything.
Like water.
The animal might not like getting eaten, but by being eaten, it provides for the entire species. That isn't a conflict. That's just a natural process that occurs, just like we take breaths every minute. We don't think about it very much, and we do it.
Okay, now cue up Santiago. Go, Santiago. What's your interpretation of this?
I'd like to hear what Anthony thinks is a conflict in nature, though. What's the conflict?
That's what I asked him too. There's a difference between the micro perspective and the micro and the macro.
Just what is a conflict in nature? Just give me an example. You
Hey,
can't?
don't interrupt Jack. Can Jack just finish what he's saying, Janet, please? He's trying to.
Now you're interceding?
Yeah. Seriously, Anthony, the mic is yours. You said that it was
Yes,
a
and
forward
that's what I'm
check
saying.
said-
I don't need to have, what I'm saying is that there is no conflict. That if you want conflict, you have it. There really is no conflict. That's what I'm saying. That's the secret. There's no conflict. Whatever you want to make the conflict, it will be that thing. But reality, there
But
is no conflict.
Anthony, minutes ago you said that's ridiculous and that there is conflict.
Right, and I've changed, and you changed, but it was life changing. I'm saying this meeting is life changing. That the Big Bang Theory is in harmony.
It isn't what's said here. It's your own awareness of an absolute present nature that determines your ability to begin to align your thinking with what's actually happening. Everything is interacting in the universe. But what's interesting is when you think of it in total, the one thing that isn't changing is that everything is changing. And so the point of our discussion here is not to do what humanity has done through history, which is to argue over the bits and pieces as though they're separate, but start to simply notice that the totality of everything, when seen as everything, isn't in conflict. Because if everything is changing, I think Plato or Socrates, somebody some long time ago recognized this. If everything is changing, the one thing that isn't changing is that everything's changing.
Yeah, and the key for me is that it doesn't really matter. I always had to be right. Like, my theory, this is right, I've proven. It's like, it doesn't really matter. It's like, I don't really care. And that's the beauty. I don't have to care. Everything I always had to care about.
You only fight for what's right when it's wrong.
Or not.
No, you only fight for what's right when it's wrong.
I like that. Janet writing that down.
Right does not need to be fought for at all because it is the essence of our nature. It's the essence of all things. This discussion, if we're having a discussion about what we're here to have the discussion about, is about beginning to notice that the absolute nature is our nature. And we well know that nature, and we don't have to think about it or understand it. And when we start thinking about it or understanding it, it isn't our nature we're doubting, it's the thinking we're doing that we're doubting about it. It's the ideas that we have that are in conflict. And there are plenty of arguments because humans have been full of arguments as long as humans have been in existence to support the contentions that they have and the reasons that they use and the excuses they use to justify continuing to hate and feel like they're at odds with everyone else. But if the ultimate nature of existence is the ultimate nature of existence, it isn't something we can't possibly not know it for it to have any knowledge whatsoever. And if it doesn't, then we would not be struggling with the lack of truth. We would be fulfilling our potential by lying and cheating and stealing and thinking in terms that are inaccurate. We would feel fulfilled, and we do not. So if this discussion has a basis, it isn't even a basis, it's an essence. And essence is essential. It is not optional. It is not negotiable. It is not something we can fight for or something we can make great effort to achieve.
I thought everything's negotiable.
It is exactly where we are now, not somewhere else, because there is no other place. Nothing that has ever happened has happened at any other time than the present.
Isn't everything negotiable?
Only in real estate.
Right. There's my co-conspirator.
So, Anthony, would that be a relative thought based on thinking?
It doesn't even matter. That's the breakthrough. It doesn't matter. I spent this meeting is called mental obsession because I don't want to think about it anymore. Everything is great. Let's just leave it at that. If you have a different view, fine. I don't need to argue 2 + 2 is 6. It's like, I know 2 + 2 is 4, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time.
You continue.
Yeah, that's the breakthrough. The breakthrough is I don't need to do the mental, because of you've helped me get through it. I thought this whole world was started with conflict. It makes a diamond, diamonds don't become diamonds unless they're compressed. And that's what makes something.
You know what I think, Anthony, might be something to think about is what one gives value to. For instance, the example of of the diamond, right? A diamond is just a rock, period. Whether it's
There's
cut,
too
whether
many.
it's
The
polished.
yeah. There's
Well,
the
no,
over.
but the thing
Yeah.
is we've been conditioned to say that, you know, we've been taught that a Ferrari is extremely valuable. But when we're a child, when we're a really young child, I know you make a joke out of this, but when we're a really young child, whether we see a Ferrari, whether we see a rock, or whether we see a donkey, it doesn't really make the donkey is probably the most exciting thing that we see in front of us. And then as we grow older, we're taught, well, this is a car, first of all, and that's, you know, important to have at one point. And then of the different cars, this car is more expensive for a certain amount of reasons than some other car. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is because we put value on all these pretty superficial things, we start to also decide on what's good, what's bad, what we need to have, what we don't need to have. All of these are thoughts that are really pretty superficial thoughts, and then
Yes, exactly, Everett.
and then we start to say we start to attach our own personal value on whether or not we have that piece of real estate or that car or whatever.
Everett, look at the time we're spending talking about something rather than what's happening now. Look at the justifications and the whole thing. We can go into all of these drawn out ideas about thoughts we have and opinions.
Well, I'm sitting in a Ferrari right now, though.
Think of how difficult it seems to be simply to talk about what's actually happening right now, not what we're thinking about over there somewhere else, what everybody does, what we do, all that stuff. We're justifying, excusing, building a case for. The only reason we build cases are to present arguments. If there's no argument, what's happening now? What is happening now? What is our experience that compels us?
Can you walk us through that? You say it like it's easy to do. You show me how you sit there and go, what's happening now?
Anthony,
we're looking at a microphone.
If there is an ever-present essence, it is your present essence right now. Now, let me ask you a question. If that is true, if that is in fact truth and reality, is there anything you need to do about that?
No, I'm happy just the way everything is.
Take a breath. So no is the answer. There's nothing you need to do about it.
Right. Damn,
so everything you're doing, you're choosing to do to try and make up for the thinking you're doing, rather than just recognizing thinking. We think thinking is true and thinking is real, and so we fight for the thoughts we've maintained.
Right.
The reason thoughts are fixed and we have fixed beliefs and fixed thoughts is because they're broken. They don't have any basis in reality other than what we think. That doesn't make them real or true. It simply makes them a thought serving a thought. That's it. And if that's the basis of the discontent and the irritability and the restlessness and the self this, self that, self this, self that, self-seeking, self-serving, all that stuff is coming out of thinking. That's who we are. It's thinking of itself that we think is who we are. And we fight for those thoughts as though they're who we are and our life depends on it.
See, but
and
that's the long version. I can't go with, I just got to go with no. I like
this is
no.
not a long version. This is an accurate assessment, as far as I can tell. It's an accurate assessment of what we do with thought that gives us an impression it's who we are. And as a result, our life depends on it. And most of what you have done here, Anthony, is try to figure out how to have that life you think depends on those thoughts be better all the time so that you can feel better about it, when in fact, it isn't even your life you're thinking about. It's simply your thoughts you're thinking.
Right, and that's a lot of work. I like doing the just no. It seems a lot easier.
Well, it is. It is. You're absolutely right. You are
no with no exceptions. Everything is like no, but. That's
very
my
good.
whole life. No, but.
Very good.
No, but.
You're right on it now, Anthony.
Yep.
Now,
I always thought my life would be great if I just had every Ferrari. Trust me, when you have every Ferrari, it's not like, oh, okay, everything's great. You're like, no, I want more. It's so no. It's no, but with exceptions. There's no more exceptions. No more exceptions.
There's never been exceptions. The only
always did that.
exceptions we have are the thoughts we have that we think are, you can have any thought you want.
Yeah,
You can have any want you want because you want all the thoughts you have.
but a price must be paid.
No, there's no price here at all.
I'm liking this program even more, Jack.
There's no cost to this.
I'm totally in no price.
There's
must
no
be paid.
cost to the absolute nature of our state
Yeah.
of being.
Free shit. Santiago, go before you pop. Go, Santiago.
But Anthony, free shit would not be what we're talking about.
Well, then, dude, listen, I'm saying just simple as no. My whole life is like no, but look at this. No, but it's like, no, I don't.
Well,
have what
if
it
you
takes.
think that's going to end, I will applaud you. I have not found that it ended.
The first leap on the show. Thank you.
I have found a clarity in seeing where the problem lies, so I have a better chance as a witness of that problem to recognize the source of it, rather than continue to think I'm going to fight it with more thinking and bombard it with more thinking.
Nobody tell. We want to talk about something that made us mad today. Like we should start the show. Like,
Anthony just made me think of something that's, I think, a little profound. And this is going back to what we're talking about.
Oh, right. It can't be told. It has to be a little profound. Thank you.
Well, no. Well, the reason why, because I'm still experiencing it. This.
Ooh, right. Go.
Right.
Go.
Well, and the reason, and the thing is going back to what we were talking about before we were recording about how I will find when I'm panicking about the future, and
end of the world destruction.
And some of that happened within the last few days. All of a sudden, my brain just like a horse that gets when sometimes horses they get scared and they just start charging, or like a stampede.
So what about now? What about right now?
Yes.
So
while you're thinking
right
about that stuff you did then, what are you doing?
What about now, Everett?
God, Anthony, knock it off.
You don't have to call me God.
When I think about those thoughts, I feel much more at ease right now.
Yes.
Being able to look at how I was thinking.
But let's stop there though. If you're at ease here, not thinking about it, it sort of identifies thinking as the culprit that creates the dis-ease, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay. So the point of our discussion is to begin to see that for all manifestations and all times and all circumstances and all stories, the source of the problem has always been the exact same thing. It isn't in the problem that we talk about. It isn't in the story. It's in the fundamental idea that thinking is our sole source. It's in the fundamental idea that thinking is going to solve the problem thinking started. And starting to see that underlies most of, I would suggest, our entire lives. And to come to terms with that, when the book talks about some big chunks to swallow, there's no bigger chunk than beginning to see that the life you thought you were leading had nothing at all to do with life and everything to do with the delusional idea of who you thought you were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's our discussion.
Yes.
And going back to those stampeding thoughts, what I learned in the program was, but what about right now? Are you okay right now?
Well, that's what this discussion is about.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden I'll find this, I don't know how many of you know white water, but like when the water's rushing down a river right behind a rock, it's called an eddy. And the water isn't moving at all, but all the water, there's all the water that's right behind the rock is standing
There's generally
still.
an undercurrent that will drown you if you stay there too long.
So
by the way, while it seems still, there is an undercurrent. And that's exactly what we do when we're trying to feel better about our thinking and wonder why we keep getting swept away. It's the exact same thing. So again, Everett, bring it now. What's happening now? The difficulty in trying to explain it, the difficulty in trying to use all this other stuff. It's happening now if it's happening. And Anthony, you may think you've dismissed it, but I guarantee you to think that is to begin
It's
to
only
set it.
been 23 minutes, Jack. Give me a little bit of slack.
Also, though, what I realized, going back to what Anthony said something,
Yes.
and I didn't realize that I do that also with things that I think are positive, like for instance, the anticipation of something and something that rewarding. Let's just use the car since we're using cars.
Are you doing that now? Are you doing that now?
Yes.
Maybe.
I am. I do.
Maybe like for instance,
I am a car.
for instance, yeah, maybe so. But like when I like with this new job, you know, there's a certain
Right now.
I don't know.
Well, I would suggest you actually do know, but within the confines of thinking, you think you don't. And that piece right
You do
there,
not have to answer this, Everett.
that piece right there, Everett, the seemingly not knowing is beginning to actually let go of the thinking you're doing chronically, to think it's up to thinking to know rather than begin to see that you already know. You know it. You know it as well as I know it, as well as anyone knows it. And we don't talk about it honestly. So we think we don't know it because we're constantly fueling and thinking the thought. That's all this 2 hours out during the week is about, is starting to actually focus on that. And rather than try to figure out how to feel better about it, start to say, when I feel worse, I'm actually accurately feeling what I'm thinking that's worse. Of course it's worse because it can't possibly be better than an absolute state that never gets better because it's just well-being. It's just a natural state of well-being. And what is being well-being but being well as humans?
Is that like saying that feeling like we're like when we're at peace is baseline?
Not when we're at peace, we're always at peace.
We're at peace, and then we're not feeling, we think we're not feeling well about something. So now on the scale, we go into the negatives, and now we want to feel better. It's not about adding something to whatever to the equation. It's letting go of the thinking that is making us feel worse, which brings us back to baseline.
If you see things for what they are, if you see things for what they are, there is nothing to let go of because they will dissolve as quickly as they are seen for what they are. And when you're looking at delusion, the reason it's a delusion is because you are taking what you're thinking seriously enough to make believe that your thoughts are the creator of truth and reality. And it's exactly what ego is. As soon as I think my thoughts are so reliable that it's who I am, I have made believe that thoughts are the creator of reality and truth. That's a pretty big leap, simply because I can think of my thoughts, which is what we consider our contemplative potential, one of the greatest attributes of humanity. And yet we've used it to give ourselves the impression of contempt and condemnation. Delusions are nothing more than lies being maintained and the illusory capacity we have to create a narrative that makes them seem like they're true. Exactly what we go through when we're having a dream.
Now you made me suspicious of good thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, good or bad, they're thoughts.
We're
It's
seeking.
good or bad is a judgment that we make according to whether we like them or not. We think the whole world evolves around what we like. It does not. The world does what it does, and it doesn't like or dislike what it does. It does what it does, just like the universe does what it does. It isn't in conflict with itself. It doesn't have a self to be in conflict with. It does what it does to have provided what we have. If we like what we have and think the earth is a place that's pretty incredible to be, then it would be the sum total of all that's happened, including all these things we can look at as conflicts, but actually are a seamless interaction of things, doing things that result in things that we are benefiting from right now to even consider those things. Jenna?
Well, I was just thinking, because we're the natural state of being would be neutrality. Like, whatever about the happy thoughts, he doesn't want to feel bad about the happy thoughts, but the happy thoughts are the same thing as the negative thoughts. They're just thoughts. They're not, nothing's factual. They're not real. Only love is real, and our natural state of being is being in peace and love, and that's neutrality.
So it's where we are now.
Right.
And most happiness, I would suggest, are the glimpses of feeling like we've escaped the unhappiness for a minute or two or 10 or an hour by doing things. We're constantly seem to be manipulating this bungee cord between good and bad and right and wrong and happy and unhappy. And when we feel free for a minute, it's a temporary impression. But I felt much freer when I drank and used drugs, but it did not resolve the problem, because underneath the feeling was a contempt that was growing and a condemnation that was getting worse, because I was getting better at continuing to do it and think I was getting better when I was doing the worst thing. It's exactly what we do in the thinking. So the good or bad is irrelevant, because those are just choices. If you choose to think somebody's bad and just decide for a week, by the way, this is very hard to do. It's really ironic that we think these thoughts we have are so intractable and so impossible to get rid of, and yet trying to feel better than them shows how flexible thinking is. And that worst thing that we're doing that we think is that constant doubt and that nagging uncertainty is as flexible as any of the thoughts we use to make it feel better. And yet, it's probably not a coincidence that people always want to feel better. Nobody says they want to feel worse for the most part. I feel too good. I would need to feel worse for a while. Because that bad thing we're doing hasn't ever really been acknowledged. It hasn't been discussed. It hasn't been looked at honestly. And if it is, and when it is, the whole point of it goes away, because there is no point to it. And you begin to see we've been trying to make the point of who we are and what we think to verify and confirm the identity of what we think is ourself. And there is no self there other than thought thinking of itself. We've been utilizing thought improperly, impractically, chronically, trying to get it to do for us what it can never do, because who we are is already fully intact. Who we are is exactly as we are, wherever we are, whenever we are, even thinking about it. Even when we think we're wrong, even when we think we're not that thing, it is still that essence that we are, period.
Well, and there's some shame in like, for me, in the response, when I recognize the responsibility of my thoughts, and I'm either looking for the parade or I'm looking for something negative to blame, the parade or blame. And then I realize that it's all just an illusion, and that I can actually rest in neutrality. What if I've had that thought for like my divorce thoughts? I've been divorced for like 15 years or something. And up until you came along and gave me the gift of responsibility, which originally I was so happy about, but then there's a lot of shame attached to it, because those are thoughts that we feel have become a part of who we are, our story. And when I realized that they're all just an illusion, and that I can, with forgiveness to myself, let it all go, that's the biggest gift. There's no parade, there's no co-conspirator, there's no positive or negative.
Thank you, Jenna. Yes.
So let me mention, shame is the painful feeling arising from the consciousness of something dishonorable, improper, or ridiculous done by oneself or another. That's shame, okay?
Yes.
Now, think of this. The shame is evidence of our awareness. It's saying in the definition, in the dictionary, it is arising from the consciousness of something dishonorable. What is dishonorable? Dishonesty, lying, cheating, all those things we do in our own thinking to think we're not doing what we're thinking. And to think because we can deny it that somehow it's not there anymore. And we begin to live this appearance of life rather than life. And we begin to express everything based on how defensive we can be, how we can hide the defensiveness to look better and appear better, which is what self-consciousness is, undue regard for appearance. That isn't a high point. That's embarrassing when we do things that we don't think align with the thinking we're doing. This essence isn't something that, and by the way, Jenna, and I would love to take credit for it all because I fought my whole life to try to get credit for everything. But in the clarity of seeing things accurately, what's become clear to me is that we all know this, and it's not what I do that makes you know it. You already know it. The fact is, we simply haven't been talking about it openly and publicly. We've talked maybe to one other person about it, but we haven't talked about it in a broader way where you can begin to see that this nature is everyone's nature. And it begins to confirm the fact that the thing we've been doing is insane to make believe that there was any self to do it for at all, for all, ever. Everyone has been harmed by the wrongs I have done, everyone. And the responsibility isn't something I can take or give. It's just a natural state of being that my existence means everything that's wrong is a part of my responsibility. And what's interesting about that is that in codependency, that would be someone taking it all on behalf of everyone else. But in this, it's beginning to see that everyone is also equally responsible.
What's the difference?
As are all things.
Why?
That's a very different approach.
Why?
That's the win-win to
Why is
life.
it different?
It's Jenna, along the lines with what you're saying too. I was married 23 years, and I look back, and it's oddly, like lately over the last couple of weeks, I'll dream sometimes of my ex, and who I do not want to be with at all. But sometimes I'll dream and I'll feel that love that I had for her at that time, and I'll wake up and I'll feel kind of lousy because of the thought of, wow, 23 years of life together with someone, just, and now it's gone. Like it was a waste of time, and all those memories and all that emotion and everything that was invested in that relationship for 23 years. And then I feel as if like that was 23 years like of a waste of time. Oh. And then when I think about what we're talking about, it was what it was. And it's not maybe it's, maybe it's not good or bad. It just was.
So Everett,
yeah.
Those thoughts you're having now, right?
Yeah.
So the
right
sum total, what you're witnessing is what you're capable of doing in the present with your thinking. And a lot of it we think is what happened, and it isn't. It's what's happening. It's actually just happening now. There is no happened at all. It's all stored in memory in some way. And I would also suggest the charge that we've assimilated in our body through stress, from missed moments and refusing to experience what we're doing and storing that energy, thinking we can hide what we feel when in fact it's killing us in obvious terms because it undermines every bodily system we have. In the name of saving a self that doesn't exist, we kill the body that does, or seems to. Pretty crazy. And it's happening presently. And I would suggest, think about dreams, starting this point earlier. Dreams feel very real. We wake up from them impacted. Our experience is impacted from those dreams. But how long is it after we wake up that they seem to dissipate, where all we remember are slight fragments and sensations that are profound? The sensations stay with us. The story starts to dissipate. It's the same thing with the chronic nature of the anxiety and the stress and the conflicts, this inner conflict and inner turmoil and this constant sense of doubt. It will dissolve as quickly as you begin to see that it's only what you're thinking now that's causing it. And you can even continue to do it and see it with the perspective of saying, I know what I'm doing for that to be happening, rather than how much more thinking can I add to this to try to fix it? It's the beginning of undoing what we do, Anthony, to your point earlier. It's the beginning of not starting this
Wait,
chronic.
I didn't hear you.
chronic.
I didn't hear you. Can you say that again, Jack?
You can listen to it later.
Oh, it's easy. Thank you. It's all because of you.
It isn't because of me, Anthony.
It is.
It is because all of us have an interest in getting better. And if we're only getting better at getting worse, we're not getting better. Well-being is a natural state, like Jana just expressed and Everett expressed. When he stopped, he felt fine. When you stopped, you felt fine. You felt okay. If that's our baseline,
I'm starting to wonder, like, how much pain you had to go through as a kid to bring. Like, I didn't start a teach.
it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to right now. Do you know what it is, Anthony? I could sit here and tell you the story and relive that and hurt all over again. And it isn't by refusing it, but by beginning to see that. Remember, they used to say, what's over is over, what's done is done. You know why?
Yes.
Because there's nothing else happening than what's happening right now. And if I want to impact, I can impact my experience with a story that I never even lived and create the same degenerative, destructive feelings.
Yeah.
I could go to a horror movie and witness those things. I don't have to relive that life I make believe was my life. That life is present now in everything I'm thinking and doing. The culmination of all that ever happened.
You're up to something. You're up to something.
The culmination of everything that has ever happened is the present. It's all here with us now, and it is what we do with it now that impacts us. It isn't about then and there and them, ever. But we can think it is, and we can distract ourselves, and we can pull our attention away and wonder why we have less attention to pay. And that sense of doom, Everett, in my experience,
impending doom.
Try this on. It isn't impending at all. It's the doom of the thinking I'm doing about the things that aren't happening, that I'm witnessing. And I'm not even able to accurately assess it. So what do? Say it's impending. Something's going to happen. If I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing right now, of course something's going to happen I don't like.
Wait a second, Jack. Let me get this straight.
So it's really, wait. So it's really that
taking away my impending doom.
So the impending doom is actually taking place right now. It's not impending. It's actually happening right now.
Exactly. And you know why it feels doomed? Because the thought you're thinking has no basis.
Damn.
What does that mean? There's no denominator. And the thinking we do obsessively keeps adding more and more to the numerator, but there's no denominator.
But here's where I'm stepping up, Jack. It's not about like solving for impending doom. It's like, I don't care what your impending doom is. Whatever it is, I'm okay with it. I don't have to prove it.
It's like double sick thinking though, because it's like first I'm thinking about the impending doom,
Everett,
but I'm not even accurate with that.
Listen to this. You're not
Everett, you're trying to deny it's here now by thinking it's impending and something coming. Right. The irony is you are actually predicting what's going to happen if you keep paying more and more attention to what's not happening. Just like if you were driving in the fast lane and thought you're in the carpool lane in your own lane, and you close your eyes and think, what could go wrong?
Is it a Ferrari?
2 miles an hour.
Jack, wait, is it a Ferrari?
Turn off the lights.
Is it a Ferrari?
In the 3 years,
shout out to Janet.
In the 3 years I've been attending this meeting, we talk about many issues. But I wonder why we didn't talk about something that is as fundamental as fear or having something to eat.
But that was the day that you weren't there.
Shut up, you motherfucker. Shut up.
Yes. That's what I want to hear.
You just, go to entertain yourself with these light comments to a place where people are not putting really all the intention in coming to something substantial. Fuck you. Anyway, I am done.
No, Santiago, I think you were onto something. You were asking about why we're not focusing on the fear and all that.
No, this is bullshit. I am not going to take this serious. If this, anyway, I am not in the right place right now. It's better I shut up.
Santiago, do it for us. Come on.
You're actually in the exact place you're in, Santiago. And let me just mention, it's probably not lost on anyone, you can be very reactive. You can act reactively. I don't say you're being reactive, but you can certainly act reactive. And those are thoughts that are reactive, that are volatile, that are hostile, that are explosive. That's all. You have ideas of. Go ahead.
I just would like to have some respect when somebody talk and don't interrupt all the time with taking the person in a curve. So I rather keep my thought for later on, and I will come back to you guys. Okay.
Keep in mind, Santiago, that's very much how we've learned to operate in the world, by backing out rather than stepping in and actually dealing with it and letting people witness it. It's not something, what you do is, I do it all the time. I might not do it as overtly. I may not be as quick to say, fuck you, but I think it enough to be exactly responsible for the same kind of thinking in my own experience. So I don't bemoan it, and I don't minimize it. As a matter of fact, I've told you before that when you express yourself, very often you're as honest as anyone that ever comes, because you're actually speaking to what's happening. And you don't have to be right to speak honestly about what's happening, and you don't have to be wrong to speak honestly to what's happening. You can be either. So to me, it's refreshing, and it's a potential to look at what motivates us and what our modes of operation have become, that give us the idea that what we need to do is stay away from people rather than step into the relationship and say, one of the things that might be worth noting here is that we're really coming together to deal with insanity. So the idea that everybody behave might be a little presumptive, given that we all have tendencies and idiosyncrasies. And I have certainly rubbed you the wrong way enough to recognize that mine don't necessarily align with yours. I don't know that mine are right. They're just ways I do things. And I know that I don't have to think yours are right to have you witness and experience your own reactions and notice them. And that's really what this discussion is about, is starting to see that as quickly as we'd like to dismiss it all and get it all fixed, we're continuing to maintain the problem when we're not being honest about what we're actually doing in our own thoughts and our own reactions, our own inability very often to respond. And response by itself is responsibility. It is the root of responsibility. It's the ability to consider and to look a little broader than the immediacy of the knee-jerk tendencies we've used for years to keep ourselves isolated, to keep ourselves feeling right, to keep ourselves being offended so quickly by what other people do, and not notice that it's a setup in our own thinking that's causing it. It's just a potential to look at that and talk about it openly and see it. Human history has been fraught with this. We are here together and struggling to have a conversation openly about something that is not in doubt, isn't in question, has no conflict. And yet most of the time we do not spend focused on that at all. I do my best to bring that back as a focus, just as a reminder, as my sense is there's nothing greater to talk about than the greatness of that absolute knowing that we all share.
Santiago, I have to say also that it's really, this group is really fascinating, because it's like different parts of one being. Like your thoughts and what you've expressed, Santiago, is not anything that I haven't thought. You and I love Anthony. I'm not picking on you, Anthony, but there are times when I've wanted to say exactly what you've said. It's not like, and then it was interesting too what you said about insanity, Jack, because I think that, and for instance, Santiago's reluctance to kind of like, if I understood you, Santiago, correctly, you want to kind of get your composure back before coming back in to the discussion, where Jack wants you to express yourself with the rawness and authenticity that you have right now. And it's interesting because I think that Santiago seems to be a very, polite, civilized and polite, and knows how to conduct himself within society very, very well. And I feel as if he kind of wants to put his tuxedo back on before expressing himself, where Jack wants you to, have that wife beater on with the coffee stain and
Well, Everett, it isn't so much I want this or that, but I'm simply noting that if what we're doing is what we're doing, and we're even afraid to be doing what we're doing, and the cause of what we're doing is what we're thinking about what we're doing. We're all creating that environment that's causing us to think we need to get away from other people as though they're the fault, when in fact it's the setup of our own predisposition that's taking those positions that sets us up to be feeling as though we're harmed. And again, most of us, I certainly have, done that through my whole supposed life, when in fact it isn't my life I was doing it through. It was the ideas I had about life that were causing it. Wasn't life that was causing it. It was actually the life I thought was mine as a self I thought I was as a result of my thinking of itself. Imagine how grandiose we are to think that simply because we can think about our thinking, we all of a sudden become our thoughts. That's a pretty inflated idea about what thinking is, to have it all of a sudden leap to the point of reality and truth, when in fact it seems to pit us against all reality and truth in every way, thousands of different forms of deception and self-centered ideas and fights and causes and all this. We take on causes, but we don't look at the cause of the actual effect that we're creating honestly. So my experience is it's worth noting. And it certainly becomes obvious in a discussion when most of what we're talking about is everything but the focus of the discussion.
When I have a thought.
Like now?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about it now. You have a thought.
And I want to, if I understand you correctly, we should observe our thoughts.
We already are.
Right. So I'm observing my thought, and it's a thought that, and this is not a thought that I'm having right now. It's just hypothetical thought. I don't like the I don't like the thought I have.
Not a hypothetical thought. You're having a thought.
I'm observing the thought. I don't like the thought I have.
Okay.
Whether it be it's the details of the thought doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Really.
Exactly.
I don't like the thought.
Got it. Thank you.
And I want to get rid of that thought. But if I understand you correctly, it's not a question of getting rid of it. I still have to observe the thought.
You don't have to do anything.
Then I'm already observing the thought.
Exactly.
So it's just.
Let me ask you a question.
A time game.
Why would you think
go away?
Why would you think you didn't like it if you weren't observing it? How would you even not like it? If you were the thought, if you in fact were the thought, your life would depend on that thought. You might not like it, but if your life depended on that thought, you would damn well.
Then I don't like myself for not liking the thought. Let's say it's condemnation.
Think of the self you're thinking of as only a self born in thought. It's not who you are as the observer. It's one that seems to be stuck in the thought because it's thought thinking of itself we think is who we are. That's the insanity. We end up in this seeming loop, Anthony, that we think we can't stop because we keep feeding it with new thoughts about the self we think we are that wants to resolve the thing because we don't like it, when in fact we chose it. And we choose to continue to do it because every moment is free enough to allow us to choose everything all over again, which means that we're constantly re-choosing to believe in it, to have faith in it, to have trust in it, when it is unbelievable, faithless, and trustless. It has no value other than what we're thinking about it. There's none. And even to the thinking we're doing, it's nothing more than a thought about the thought. that we're doing. That's, you
Of our-
said earlier, it has two sides. It's a feedback loop that's constantly thinking about the thinking, and we think we get stuck in it, but we keep feeding it with new thoughts and wonder why it seems to go on when we're feeding it. We're doing the thing that's causing it and actually claiming we don't want the effect because we don't like it, but we're willing to continue. That's sick. And it's
with a false
insane.
self.
Excuse me?
With a false self.
There is no false self. There is no self that's false. It's an idea about who we think we are that is just what we think. We can think that all day long. I can think I'm a fireman. I'm not going to help anybody when it comes to putting out a fire, and I would be putting them at great risk to go to a fire and say, don't call the fire department, I'm here. Right? Those actions would be pretty crazy. And I would probably be held to account in the law for some reason because I now caused something to happen that wouldn't have otherwise happened had it not been for my own actions. And it's all self-induced by a self that doesn't exist. So we blame ego as though it has some life of its own doing it to us. People talk about, well, my ego, this, that, and the other thing. My ego, like it's a piece of luggage. My luggage is really heavy and I just keep dragging it around and I can't understand why it weighs so much. And boy, oh boy, my luggage has really got it out for me. It's a self-induced excuse we use to justify not doing what we're doing in the thinking we're thinking about the thinking we're thinking. That's it. It is so quick and so immediate and so ever present when we're doing it that we are pretending it's all there is in the absolute ever present state of awareness that we are sharing.
Peeling back the onion.
Well,
That's
think of the narratives we create. We now give storylines that come with narratives to the story that there's an onion to actually peel, when in fact, if it's a delusion, it's an illusion I'm having that I think is true, just like the idea I think my thoughts are true. All of a sudden, illusions become true, and that means they're delusional. What is there about a delusion to let go of, but the present idea that there's anything there to let go of? There's nothing to let go of.
So the onion is an illusion.
No, it's a narrative we use to give us the impression that if we keep peeling and peeling and peeling, we'll get better. But what we're getting better at is narrating the story that there's an onion to peel. There's nothing there. That's the illusion and the delusion of it all. Bill Wilson said, deflate the ego at depth. What does that mean? Let all the hot air out. It's like letting the thing off. It's when you let go of the nipple of a balloon, it just blows all over the place and dissipates. It's gone. No longer does the balloon. If we're trying to get better and feel better all the time, we're doing what's worse all the time and not noticing. We're trying to treat the effect. It's exactly what we tried to do when we tried to stop drinking and not notice that it was the powerless over the drinking we were struggling with because we thought we had power. It is an insane idea for an alcoholic or a drug addict to think they have power over their drug and alcohol use. You know why it's insane? Because as long as I maintain it, I will do everything to prove what my insane idea is correct. And that means drinking more and more and more and more and more to try to stay ahead of what's getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, which is the thought, I can manage it, I can control it, I can enjoy it. It's the exact same thing. Now, without the drinking having been freed, there's a quote in the 12 and 12, I think it is. It says, having been granted, meaning taken for granted that this perfect release exists. Having been granted perfect release from alcoholism, why shouldn't we be able to achieve by the same means perfect release from every defect and difficulty? It's a good question, right? Bill says, perhaps this is the question of the universe, or a riddle of the universe. Who are riddles to, but people who think. Certainly not lions and tigers and bears. They're not confounded by this. But to us, it's a riddle. And he goes on to say, perhaps, because he's always generous, The answer is only in the mind of God. And his answer is, perhaps we are in that mind. Perhaps our essence is that mind. Perhaps the absolute nature of our existence isn't questionable at all. It isn't doubtful at all. It isn't some place to get. It's where we've always been, thinking we weren't. In the Course in Miracles, it says the one sin is to think that we can be apart from God. That's the primary sin, the thought. And what is that in the Bible? The creation of the devil, the angel, the perfect angel that turns into a devil, a miscreant, a mischievous imp, running around and hurting people and harming people. It's exactly what we do as humans, and blame God for not listening to our prayers when all of our prayers are always answered. We just do not like the answers of the sick prayers we have. Again, we turn it into like and dislike, thinking it's up to us. I only want to live in a world I like. Well, that's a fucking problem. And when I'm the one I think I love, and the love that's based in the self I think I am is based in fear and loathing, what is our love? The whole basis of it is generated by fear. Why? Because I know better than to think that's who I am. Why? Because I know, and I'm aware I'm aware. And I know, knowing that everyone knows that, because it would mean that infinity is infinite minus one, which would violate the entirety of the whole concept if anyone or anything was excluded from it. It's impossible, which is why it is not an option. It is not a choice. In addiction, we think the only choice is the thing to do that kills us. In reality, having no choice actually means life. And to think in life-affirming ways allow our thinking to start functioning in functional ways that are stable and considerate and generous and inclusive rather than exclusive. And feeling separate, feeling alone, feeling discontent. Think of the word discontent. It means no content. Of course I feel discontent. There's no content to the self I think I am, the life I think I'm leading as a result. It's like paying for Netflix and they don't have any shows. There's no content. Of course I would be discontent, irritable, restless. Why not? I'm pissed off. I keep paying for something with all the effort I have, and I don't get anything back but nothing. And you know what? That's a perfect bit of feedback to tell me it's the nothing I'm doing that I'm getting back honestly and accurately. Because the absolute nature is always revealed in everything that's happening. What is wrong will never work. Ever. There's something absolute. And what is right always works. And if I spend my time trying to get better at being wrong, I'm going to create effects I don't like any more than the first wrong I was trying to get better than. And it's insane to think someday wrong will get right rather than finally notice, you know what, it's never worked, it won't work. That's the end of that. It's never going to work. And you know what? There's a beauty to the fact that it never works because it's consistent and it's honest. And yet right, I don't have to make it up at all. If I apply it once and it works, I just start doing it. I don't even think about it for the most part. There's no obsessive thinking in that. I know immediately I can get behind the car and start the engine. And all the years I sat in the car not starting the engine and thinking the car was screwed up, all of a sudden become clear. Oh, I didn't turn the engine on. I see. I don't think about it when I get in. What was that thing I did? But in the obsessive thinking, it's always trying to get those thoughts right because they're all wrong and they're all going to be wrong. And what does the book say? 100 forms of delusion, self-delusion, self-pity. We create and fracture like a kaleidoscope our entire experience to give ourselves credence so that we can make arguments for stuff that has no basis for the sake of trying to be right. And what we're doing is killing ourselves at the same time, undermining every single bodily function that we have. All of our bodily systems that are designed to maintain homeostasis and balance are thrown out of balance from stress, every single one of them. And here again, to that point, we don't even have to think about what they're doing. for them to be doing what they're doing. And yet when we start imposing those anxiety on them, they begin to dysfunction, and we start thinking about them because they hurt, and we get depressed, and our bodily systems get depressed, our immune system gets depressed, and all of a sudden we're susceptible to diseases. And how do we know? Because they hurt. They tell us the body's saying something's wrong here. And where did it come from? Stress, anxiety, thought. So when I use thought against me, when it's been designed to help promote life and our experience, our human experience, for the benefit of all, not just my body, everyone's body, the whole of the body population, like the bodies of water, the oceans represent. It's all of us. It's not one of us. It isn't me against you. It isn't me for you. It is us in favor of who we actually are that is favorable compared to the disfavor that we create and the disenchantment and all the disses, the disturbance, all of them. And it's always what we do presently, now, that causes what's happening. There's nothing we've ever done that holds us to do it again at all, except the thought we have it's the only thing we can do. And that's a sick, addictive thought, period.
I'm silent. I'm on my own. I just ignore it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Book talks about pause, restraint of pen and tongue. Think of that. What is pausing but witnessing the silent nature of our existence? It's just taking a break from the crusade of thought. The chronic, trying to figure it out, trying to get better, trying to feel better, trying to get more, trying to do this. Those are all attempts to make believe that we don't have everything where we are, that we aren't where we are, we should be somewhere else. Think about the fears identified in the book. Afraid of losing what we have and not getting what we want. So now imagine this. If where we are is where everything else is, then we have everything here. And to think we're not here would be to immediately lose the impression of being here and having everything by having nothing. And if there's nothing more you can want than everything, we immediately also lose the impression that we have what we want. So we think what we need is somewhere else, with someone else, somehow else, somewhere else with someone else, in some way other than more or less of what's happening now. Always more or less of what's happening now. Because why? Fulfillment of the present is always all there is. It's always our nature. And whenever anyone meditates, you know that within minutes of being quiet, you start witnessing and observing something that's obviously much less conflicted than the thoughts you're having. That thing doesn't come because you're meditating. That thing is always there, and we're finally just paying attention to it. Our discussion is an awakened meditation. How do we apply this 24 hours a day? Because as far as I can tell, the steps asked me to practice principles in all my affairs. It didn't say occasionally until you like the life you're leading, and then you can parade around as somebody who's really gotten it all done. And now you're better and everybody else is fucked. Practicing principles in our affairs, begin to realize life is based on principles. I don't have to practice them for them to be there, but if I begin to engage at a human level that's aligned with principles, I begin to act naturally in principled ways. Because I'm conscious, because I'm aware, because I recognize immediately when something's wrong. And I recognize the defectiveness of my thinking because I feel defective immediately when the thoughts are defective. And I start actually realizing, wow, I have a pretty good barometer in this body offering me body language that I thought was a foreign language that I didn't want to listen to or couldn't understand, when in fact I understood it the whole time. I just didn't want to pay any attention to it because I was too busy paying attention to things that weren't even happening, is all that was happening. What's the temperature, Andrew?
It's a mild 40 today, above
Oh,
zero.
Andrew's up in Montana. I can see him hiking.
Sorry, should I put it on? I'll turn the video. I'm sorry, dude.
No, you're good.
Okay.
So is there any difference between the Netflix analogy and buying a new Ferrari? Like the Netflix, you get 0 for it. You buy a new Ferrari, you get 0 for it.
Well, it's pretty evident that when more is never enough and enough is never enough, that words have lost their complete ability to actually have any meaning. And you're really beginning to delve into an absolute.
Right, but let me the truth. But love is the key to everything, right? Love is the answer to all.
It's not a key.
Okay, well, there's got to be, this is what I have on my notes. So first, there's the responsibility of the fact that what you're doing isn't making you feel better in the overall scheme of the world. You're not being inclusive with everybody else. That's not love. If you're not being inclusive, that's not love. So once you get the responsibility idea and then the shame, to give yourself forgiveness, to dismantle those thoughts that we have created to feel better. If we're trying to feel better all the time.
But to dismantle them, John, is to give them even the opinion that they're on the mantle, when in fact they're just a thought you're having now that continues to give them credence that they don't have other than the thinking you're doing. They have no basis. So love doesn't come or go. Something absolute and infinite does not come or go.
Zach, I'm going to change your world. You know how you just said they don't have any basis? What if they do have them?
But what I'm thinking is, if maybe a couple of years ago you had given Anthony permission,
right, signed, written permission,
responsibility for that, it could have saved him a couple $1 million.
Yes, Jack, and now you have a lawsuit on your hands, bro.
So what's beautiful about all this is that we're all free to think whatever we want. And
no, we're not. Some people are not free to think whatever they're right. You know how you just go, "Oh, we're all free." It's like some people are not.
Anthony,
free to think
how come you can spend so much time doubting what you're doing and have such certainty about other people?
Because I'm multitasking, bro.
Just consider that.
I don't have to consider anything anymore. That's the key, bro. There's no more any, like, you know how you have all these rules? Jana has rules on love. She's like, love is required. Like, what the hell? Like, there is no requirements on love.
She didn't say that.
She did. She's like, you define love. Tell me what love is, Jana.
It's our absolute state of being. And
right. So you have rules. Listen, there's a rule.
Anthony, you asked me a question and then you bowled over me. That's
right.
why.
That's what I do. That's what I do.
Yeah, it's what you do, Anthony, because you think it's who you are.
And I do it well. And I'll tell you up front, that's what listen, Jenna, you have rules on love. You're telling me what the rule, tell me about love. What is love?
Well, I tried to tell you and you cut me off. Are you going to shut up?
Anthony, Are you actually interested in an answer that would actually be considered by you? Or are you interested in trying to figure out what you'll say so you can continue to argue over it? I mean, are you sincerely interested, or is this just another quest to use whatever's said as a justification to continue launching in the crusade that you're on? I must have found the mute button.
Right?
Listen,
right?
We have been lying and cheating and stealing from each other and our own experience.
No, now stop right there. That's a theory. It's not positive. Like,
okay, Anthony. So
and it's not now. What's happening now? It's not.
Yes, exactly, Anthony. We are talking now. And I'm talking precisely about what you're doing and what we're doing collectively now.
Why is that important?
What's that?
Why is that important?
Why is it important? Or is your presence important?
No, I'm just asking
your existence important to you?
No, I'm not asking you. I'm saying, why is that important to you?
Why is it important to me?
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that we have a much greater potential to do things collectively as a species than we have done historically. And I would say
why is that important to you?
There is no you. We're all one, and love is cumulative.
It's just a decision, Anthony.
No, what I'm
May
saying,
I-
but why? I want to go a step farther. Whatever you've taken, like what I'm saying, what is the main goal that you want to do? If you could have one wish, what would it be?
To have no wishes.
Exactly. Right?
He actually said this at the top of the meeting, though.
Right.
Jack,
And that's where I was like,
wait,
hold
wait,
on a
wait, wait,
second.
wait, 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 Jack, didn't you say that your mission? Okay, don't quote me exactly, but your mission is that we. I'm not saying it the right way, but that we have everything.
We do.
That
The point of the conversation is to stay focused on noticing that our primary basis to even ask questions, to be in doubt, to be depressed, to kill ourselves is based on an
Santiago.
absolute present state of being that we don't think is our present state of being. And as a result, dysfunction and disintegrate and disengage and fight and are caustic with everyone else and everything else as a result, including our own bodily systems. It is only what we're thinking that we have been addicted to that is causing those effects. And to miss that is to make believe there's nothing there to deal with and see. And it means pretty much how we've gone through civilization to date. So I don't know that I have any greater purpose, Anthony, than the purpose of life itself. And it isn't my purpose. For life certainly.
Well, let me just stop you right there. What if it doesn't even matter? What if it's not about like you're all into my show, like what if it doesn't even, like you don't have to do anything. There doesn't
So
need
why
to
do
be
you
a
come
show.
every week now for 3 years?
Because I've been trying to figure out the answer that it's just like, I'm like, I have.
And you've been
everything I've
fighting for your thinking the whole time, trying to make
right. And I just realized I've never just once said no. It's always like, no, I have wrong. No, I'm rich. No, it's like just no. No is enough. No. I don't need to have, that was the most clear, that was it.
But you
So
keep
simple.
doing it.
No, because before, I'm not going to do that. That was just because
You've been doing
I used
it.
to do
You've
it.
been doing it for pretty much the whole session.
Do you think I can change?
You're changing constantly in
Right,
terms of your
hello.
physicality, in
But
terms
I'm
of
the
your.
one guy. I'm the exception of the rule. I cannot change. You know how you always says the only thing that's consistent is change. Like, no, dude, look at me. I'm not changing at all.
I didn't say that, Anthony. I said that when everything is always changing, the one thing that doesn't change is that everything's changing. So you're always changing, and your thoughts are always changing because the absolute doesn't change.
Oh,
Doesn't
can I
mean
come
that-
back next week or not? That's all I need to know.
Okay, so in the big book, we talk about our allergies and that it brings on a phenomenon
of craving.
And that is so big because they also state that it's mostly in our head, but really the phenomenon of craving is physiological.
Yes,
So,
but Jana,
It's phenomena.
consider that thoughts are physiological, and consider the craving of when I am lying, I crave the next thought because I chronically need to think about the lie as true to keep it alive in my thinking. The craving is created in the brain as a physiological consequence of a thought. And so what does it do? Expresses itself in allergies. What am I allergic to? Lying. What's an allergy? An abnormal response. What's the abnormal response? Do more and more and more to try to fix the thing that's wrong rather than stop it and say, no more. I'm not going to do that. I don't have any obligation to do it. And when I notice myself doing it, I'm at least starting to say, wow, I do this without even thinking, which tells me that I've buried ideas in my subconscious that motivate me that I don't even think I'm doing. And now I start to get a glimpse of the motivating factor that seems to be beneath the surface, but is clearly exposing itself in my actions on a very regular basis.
I think the crux of that is the buried thoughts. Like I had to recognize the responsibility of those thoughts, which
You
originally
didn't have to. I could hear Jack saying, you don't have to.
which I was originally elated by, but then I got a big, huge rush of shame thinking, that I was in fact responsible. And
Yeah.
when-
Yeah, surprise.
right?
Well,
remember-
keep in mind, our
Like-
anxiety, our stress, all of the disorders, think about the word disorders, anxious disorders, metabolic disorders, immune disorders, all diseases are considered disorders. What does that mean? Something's out of order. Where does that start? My thinking. When I think my thinking is my sole source and I keep thinking more thinking's going to fix the problem that thinking created, I am obsessively committed to the sick idea that somehow there's a resolution in the problem being recreated by more and more thinking. The disorder is thinking there's no greater source. And it reflects and fractures, just as Bill said, 100 forms of delusion. I'd say that it's probably in the billions.
Hey, Jack, there's a guy in my town here, an old timer in my meetings. And I love what he says. He says, when I try to define my higher power, I put limitations on it. And so when I heard the question just now, well, what is love? Because that's a word I often use when I read with my sons, sometimes out of the big book, when I want to substitute for the word God. And for me, as soon as I put an answer on that, a definition on that, I become higher than the power itself.
Exactly.
And that's my that's
Dude,
my
that is
and that's
so
on me.
awesome. The way he's in the Mount Everest, telling us what's up there over the top of the mountain.
No, I am looking at mountains, and I don't need to define them. I don't need to explain what is love, and I don't have to just define my higher power. I just know it's there, and I'm okay with that. And that puts me at ease, not dis-ease. It's when
What
I'm
if it
thinking, I
was not
believe.
there? You're okay knowing it's there, but what if the truth was you're okay? Are you okay knowing it's not there? Does it have to be there for you to
Yes.
be okay?
Yeah.
So then you
And
do
I
have
don't know.
limitations.
It's
No,
just fun.
I'm fine either way. I'm okay with it. I'm at peace.
Well,
Which way would you rather?
That's all I got.
So on
Not for
that
me.
point, though, it's a very good point. Since Montana's in your thing, I'm going to refer to you as Montana. I'm sorry
The weather balloon
I
capital.
missed that initially. But the point is that words are functions of thoughts. And thoughts, when not thinking of infinite absolute ways and not being used in infinite absolute ways, are always limited. So self-centered thinking is thinking things are only the way we think they are. So obviously we're going to create a problem with that. And it's just, if principles are principles, they're always principles no matter what we think. If words are words, they're never going to add up to something that doesn't
Can
have any.
principles ever not be principles? Do principles always have to be like, if you're a principle, you have to, is it possible a principle cannot be a principle?
Well, search that out the next couple of weeks and get back to us on that.
So
Did you
principle always,
read, Anthony?
what?
You read those principles I sent you?
Yes, I have them on my wall.
Show us.
Right? You know, that's what I'm
So-
saying. If this,
Anthony, spend 2 weeks investigating that and get back to us. Okay.
okay.
So
And for the listeners that don't
back to
understand what I'm saying,
Montana and the train of thought. If words are words, they're Oliver Wendell Holmes said that words are the skin of ideas, meaning that they incorporate ideas. What are ideas but thoughts? Absolute knowing doesn't think because it has nothing to think about. It already knows everything. So in an absolute state, if it's comprehensible, it's incomprehensible. Because we're trying to refine and define something that has no bounds or limits. And one way to begin to define it is to simply concede that it is as it is. And that can be done in thought. And that can be as inclusive as anything as it is, because whatever it is regardless of what we think. And this really strikes at the core of mentally obsessive thinking. The only reason we think obsessively is because the thought we're having is limited and we think it's true. And when our thoughts are true
you're supposed
can't
to say
have
I,
exceptions
isn't it?
to
Like
it.
more I. Supposed
Thoughts,
to be I.
truth can't have exceptions to it, or it wouldn't be true. So if it isn't true for all, it can't be true for me and not everyone else. It's got to be true for everything and everyone for it to be true in the
That's
way
not
we're
reality,
discussing
though,
it.
right? That's like in a perfect. That's not this world, though.
The point is, we can use our thinking to think of things in absolute terms. We just haven't used it that way, so it seems impossible, when in fact, we can certainly say truth is true and reality is real. And that doesn't lead to any questions or doubt, because all doubt is based on questions. And normally what we're asking is why, what, where, when, how. How is that the case? Why is that the case? Where is that? All we're doing is reinforcing doubt by going along, and humans have been seeking throughout all of history, seeking, and apparently we haven't found, to be still seeking, and to have a $10 billion a year self-help industry that's helping a self to the idea there's a self to help, when in fact it's just ideas about our thinking that are being created by thinking about our thinking. That's all the self is. That's all ego is. Thinking about thinking. So the thing that we do that's primary to our survival, we have turned into something that threatens our survival, which clearly indicates that is not how we were designed to operate at the highest level, but it's certainly the way we were designed to operate at a level that we would not consider to be the highest achievement. Meaning anxiety, stress, all the depression, all of the self-inflicted conflict, inner turmoil, are accurate assessments of our expression of knowing exactly what we're doing. They are all manifest as exact conditions created by what we're doing. They are not secrets. They are not subconscious. We claim it to be subconscious so we can develop a narrative that there's somewhere else. And part of a point about a God being there is realizing that there is always somewhere other than here, rather than start to see that that nature is our nature wherever we are. And when I don't think it's my nature, it's my thinking that's causing the impressions I'm creating, not reality or truth. It's all internal delusion in my own brain that I am misusing. And yet it's giving me accurate feedback to what I'm doing is a guidance system to offer me perspective to what I claim to otherwise be blind to. Blind faith is the idea that I'm having faith in something that that's faithless, has no basis. I have faith in something. The blindness isn't blind. It's that I'm looking into darkness because there's nothing there to see, but I'm seeing it perfectly clearly and claiming it's dark and I can't see. I'm actually seeing the darkness perfectly. I'm witness to it. I'm aware of it. And when I speak to what I'm feeling and thinking accurately, I start seeing that I've been talking to what I thought was going on. And I've been talking to a self born in thought. And I've been thinking to a self that is only thinking about my thinking. It isn't talking and thinking to a self at all. Except that when thinking thinks of itself, it thinks up a self born in thought. That's what self-centered thought is, centered in thought, period. It's a mistaken identity made believe to be true that I seem to struggle with to give it validity. My struggle gives it validity. It gives me a narrative that there's something there to fight with. While I continue to fight with it and the narratives I create and make believe somehow I'll get better if I just keep looking at it harder, thinking about it more. The obsession to think is an addiction, and it's a sick obsession, which is why mental illness and all the mental disorders are insane. Insanity is seeing and hearing things not happening. If I am talking to a self that doesn't exist and listening to the feedback of the thinking I'm doing as though it's a voice, I am hearing and seeing things that aren't happening. I'm creating narratives of things that I see in imagery, onions that I'm peeling and people that I'm fixing and helping and all this kind of stuff I create to create a narrative that's just like a fairy tale. And when fantasy is reality, that's a pretty good definition for insanity. When I'm trying to live my dreams, Well, my dreams, I'm asleep during that time. What about the actual awakened state that most of my time is spent in, where most of what I choose to do impacts people? Why am I searching always to be in my dreams? Rather than realize I'm asleep to the ideas of what are actually happening, I've numbed myself, desensitized myself to the point of feeling as though what's happening isn't actually even happening, to make believe that what I should be doing is about things that aren't happening, more than actually look at what's happening and say, wow, I go to great lengths to come up with ideas to think about obsessively, when in fact it's what I'm choosing to do with them that I'm obsessed over, because there's no hope in any of them. The more I hope for them, the worse they get. The more I have faith in them, the less they are faithless. The more trust I put in them, the more untrustworthy consequences I face. Interesting that truth and reality don't need faith at all to be true and real. They don't need belief to be true and real. They don't need any human endeavor, because they are an absolute gift, given without any restrictions to all that are and all that is. And this, I would say, Anthony, is a description of love. It doesn't get pulled back when we don't think it's there, and it doesn't get repulsed by what we do. We get repulsed and we pull back in our own human experience. I grew up in a church that said God is love on the walls. I didn't witness that from all the people that were there, but it was a profound impact to think of that as being the nature of what we call God, the nature of this infinite source. And the fact is, if it isn't that, if we applied that, it wouldn't have any positive impact on us. It wouldn't have any productive result on us. It wouldn't have any meaningful expression as a result. It would all just be more of the same vacant emptiness, wanting more, wanting to be somewhere else, wanting to be with someone else, wanting to have more or less of this, that, or the other thing. And I haven't experienced that at all. I found the complete opposite. A sense of fulfillment, a sense of place, a sense of knowing, a sense of awareness, well beyond the thinking I used to do. I don't suspect those would be consequences if there was nothing there and I was creating a brand new delusion. I'm familiar with what that's about. I'm not quite as familiar with what an absolute nature is about in terms of expressing it openly and honestly in all my affairs. There is no fear in love. There is no fear in truth and reality at all. And even in our own experience, when you have real situations that are threatening you, you know quickly, without doubt, without question, what to do in real situations with what is real fear, because it's designed to help save us. And what we call fear is actually turning instincts backwards so that everything we do is an attempt to kill us. And it's killing the body rather than simply letting go of the thought we have as to who we are. And when it comes to those near-death experiences we've been talking about, it seems as though as humans, we're so densely packed around these ideas that we have, we need to be pushed hard against those thoughts and beyond those thoughts to finally begin to witness the absolute nature of our existence, which seems to be consistent between all people who have these near-death experiences. They're profound awarenesses that they come back to Montana's point earlier. When they come back into their body, they say, I don't even know how to explain it. I can't put words to it. Of course they can't. It's not a rational, reasonable sense of knowing. Intuition is knowledge beyond reason. It doesn't include thought, reason, or understanding at all. None. We can't put words to it because it doesn't have any lack. It's where we are now. It's full now. It's complete now. It's whole now. It's not somewhere else. It's not some other place. It's not only there when I think it's there. It's here now. It is our nature. It is so much our nature that we think we can argue over it to convince ourselves it is, rather than notice that all the arguing do is give us more and more to think about, to give us the impression that there's nothing there. Certainly something we can do. We're free to do it. But when contempt is the result and self-loathing is the result, And self-doubt is the result. And self-consciousness, which should be a high point, but is undue regard for appearance, is the result. There's something obviously wrong with what we're doing. And I don't say me or you, I say we, collectively. If I think it's impossible, I'm going to do things that make sure it's impossible to keep that wrong thought appearing right. And I'm going to make sure I have evidence of it by creating circumstances that seem impossible so I can say, see, I told you. Stomp my feet a little harder. So we're down to the last 15 minutes or so.
Jack, just want to say thanks. I appreciate it. I had to tap out here, but some circumstances, but I'm so glad I got to see you guys. Thank you so much.
Happy to see the Montana sky.
Aloha.
Oh my God. Yeah, you guys gave me a lot of not to think about.
What's interesting that's worth noting is that when we start actually thinking about what's happening, it's an adventure, and thought is being used according to its design. It's designed to be useful and helpful. It's not designed to be used against us, to kill us and give us false impressions and phobias. Those are all things we're doing by simply misusing it. So the thinking changes dramatically, as do the circumstances, because you're actually engaged with what's happening rather than only what you're imagining is happening as being truth and reality. So I'm glad to have you today.
No, exactly. You just made me think of two things. One of which is that 11th step in the 12 and 12, when it talks about creative imagination and using that. Like you talked about meditation earlier.
Yeah.
And during that moment, because in meditation, I have a lot of times it comes up. I just think of these, I get scared. I have little fears that come up, but I know they don't exist.
Well, but to dismiss them is to dismiss the thinking you're doing that's causing them, rather than beginning to say, wow, I really am busy doing things I don't even think I'm doing to be caught off guard by these things. Think of the term caught off guard. It's a pretty good indication we know we're constantly on guard.
Right.
What are we guarding if it's strong, if it's real, if it's inviolable and indivisible? There's nothing to guard in that. So anyway, we're glad to have you here today.
No, I love that. But if I'm lucky enough in those moments of meditation, if I am lucky enough to get through some other side, which has only happened a couple of times for me, when I realize they are what they are, and my guard is lowered, and I actually access a little serenity at that moment. It's usually in that moment that my once limited creative imagination, for thinking I was a creative person, begins to actually truly open.
Well, and my sense is it's always open. We just don't think it is, because we get so wrapped in thinking. When you think of it accurately, it starts to become so silly that we would have posed as this person that we aren't for so long to try to make it into something it can never be. It's exactly what a lie is. A lie only lasts as long as somebody claims it's true. As soon as a lie's a lie, it's no longer a lie. There's no fight.
Totally. There's no fight. Exactly.
Good to see you.
Yeah. Good to see you. Much love. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So if this present nature is 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, because it's our nature, then the question is, what are we doing to thwart it during our week? What are we doing to inhibit it during our week? We're really not inhibiting it, but we're going to do things that look like it isn't there, which can be very caustic in relation to what other people witness and experience. And I have huge deficiencies in my ability to interact with people honestly enough to allow them a broader view, rather than force them into a corner where they start seeing less and less and less of me in terms of potential and capacity, because I'm not always that generous to share that with others. I'm very often generous to share what I'm thinking should be happening rather than what I actually know is happening. And that practice, I would say, if we're asked to practice principles in all our affairs, it's because principles are always present. They're not something I have to get to or find. They're just the difference between expressing them through thoughts, which is my sense is thoughts are designed to express truth in reality, not to create truth in reality. And when I think it's up to my thoughts to define who I am, I think my thoughts are real enough to create who I am rather than recognize I'm already created to even think that, to even recognize that, to even notice that, to even ask that question. It confirms the fact that I exist. So the I in the sentence, I am thinking to myself, is obviously something distinct from the self I'm thinking to and of. And I would say all we've ever done, we're not thinking to ourself and we're not thinking to myself. We're simply thinking about our thinking. And to see things clearly evaporates them immediately because there is no misguided, mistaken, misaligned, maligned thought attached. When my thoughts are not aligned with what's happening, I create friction and all the kind of things that go into the internal conflict that I think is happening to me rather than being caused by me. And seeing cause rather than effect. If I feel bad, it's being caused by something bad. And if thought is the precursor to my feelings, because they're immediately sharing the exact same seemingly invisible space in my brain between my ears, wrapped so cleanly in my skull, I don't actually see them happening, but I think about them and I witness their effects. And if the effects are revealing it, they're giving me what I thought I didn't know, thought I didn't think I knew, in actually witnessing the effects I'm witnessing. They're telling me, they're giving me information in plain view of what I'm doing in this place I don't think I'm doing, which we've called subconscious. I don't believe there's much of a subconscious. I do believe there's a lot that we're not aware of because it's doing the job without us needing to think about it. And the reason we don't think it's there is because it's just doing the job it's doing without us thinking about it. It doesn't need our thinking. And ironically, and maybe not ironically, those same systems we don't have to think about are undermined by the tension and stress and anxiety we create in everything they're doing. And yet we say, well, I don't even have to think about them. And yet the thinking we do undermines them, as though we don't know they're there. We know they're there because our bodies hurt and our bodies are tired and generally sick and tired, but often not tired enough to stop thinking what we're thinking that's sick. Our opportunity, as far as I can tell, is to begin to speak in terms that reflect what's happening between us so we get a little better doing that in the other 164 hours or 66 hours a week in our other experience with all the others. And my sense is talking about what we're doing accurately and honestly and reminding people, this is just a thought I'm going to share. It's just a thought. It's a thought I am having. I am having this thought and I want to share it. Takes a lot of the sting out of people feeling offended, taking it personally. Think about taking things personally. Who's the person that's taking them but the self we think we are that's offended? Why? Because that self is offensive. That thing is on the constant defense because it's offended by anything that doesn't think like we think. Anything, anytime is going to be irritated by that. This can seem a little bit like work. And my sense is, when I think I'm getting better at not feeling what I'm doing, I am working toward trying to become desensitized to what's wrong. And this is beginning to open it up and have it available enough to be witnessed for what it is and recognize that wrong doesn't feel right. And if I'm not feeling disturbed by seeing something disturbed, there's a psychotic break with what's actually happening. And to see this accurately is to start to allow it to be. And when you're not in conflict with what's happening, it will dissipate and dissolve immediately to the degree that you're willing to see it clearly, because there's nothing else there but a thought. And it's only a thought against a thought that seems to create this constant obsessive need to think about it all the time. It's the rub I think Shakespeare was describing. He was talking about the freedom of killing oneself, suicide, and then said, oh, but the chance to dream. And then he thought, wait a minute, if we have the chance to dream, maybe we're not killing a self at all. Maybe there's an awareness here that's much greater than what we're thinking. And he's starting to bring that awareness into the discussion of saying maybe there is some reason for doubt because we're just thinking wrong and thinking all we are is what we think. And if that's the case, who we are has nothing to do with what we think and everything to do with what we know. Any parting shots?
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Santiago, very much. I appreciate your honesty and frankness.
See you in a couple of weeks.
1 week. And everyone out there, this has been lively, a bit dynamic, and a good chance to see how we as humans struggle to communicate. And I can look at everyone else and see clearly what I think is wrong, but it is the wrong I am thinking that I ultimately am most impacted by and most impact everyone else with. So this is about just starting to look at that and using the time in between to begin to just assess and say, wow, could I be doing something so wrong as to even think I'm not doing it? And start to pop some of the bubbles that seem to be separating us and keeping us alone. It's interesting that people feel they get so sick and tired of other people because those other people trigger things in them rather than recognize they're never going to get away from the things that are being triggered by spending more time alone. It's actually going to become a little more pronounced. And part of that, in my experience, is that when I started getting more and more of what I wanted, I realized the problem became clearer. It didn't go away because I'd only been distracting myself with something that wasn't happening, as though someday when it did happen, I'd be better. And when I finally had those things I thought I wanted, I realized that the problem was still there and it actually became clearer. And in sobriety, that's one of the gifts. My sense is that not drinking and using offers me the chance to begin to look honestly at my experience and begin to be the observer, honestly observing rather than turning what I'm observing into some new concoction of thought that gives me the impression my thinking again is in charge, and start to actually disengage from that and undo rather than perpetually redo, repeat, thinking somehow it'll get better if I just do it more and more and more and more. And so the time in between is a good time to do that because I'm not there harping on these points, and I may be, though. I may call you. I may put you at seeming risk, but any risk we're at in our thinking is based on thought. Our essence is never, ever jeopardized, ever. There's no possibility.
I have a thought. To be successful in our sobriety, we have to have an essential psychic change. And to have that, we have to feel that there's something more than human power is needed to produce this essential psychic change. And our ideas must be grounded in a power greater than ourselves.
Which is the state of our natural, when we recognize our natural state, those things are all true. It's just obvious because they can't be anything other than that. And again, it shows how we think thinking gets us there rather than start to admit we're always there. We just haven't been thinking we were.
But when I hit, am I up to something?
Yeah.
Then I can think about that creepy thought that's going to cause anguish and ask myself, is this grounded in a power greater than myself? And then that can bring me back to neutrality.
Well, again, you're never out of neutrality. You're just thinking you are because you get stuck in the loop of that thought.
A flawed human.
What's that?
I am a flawed human, though. So occasionally I think I'm not.
It's only what you think about what you do that's flawed, because you're not letting what you're doing be what it is. And when you do, there is no flaw in that. Something compared to itself is perfect. Something compared to a thought of what it shouldn't be is obviously imperfect, because we're comparing things that aren't even. We're always going to find things odd in that. That search is part of this chronic thinking that thinking will solve it, when in fact it's the thinking that's comparing it that's causing the contrast and the seemingly disjointed imperfection. If everything is as it is, it's perfect as it is. Doesn't mean we can't do anything differently. We can do whatever we want. But as things are, they are right now, always. So to be thinking I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing while I'm doing what I'm doing is pretty crazy, literally. Love you guys.
Love
And
you.
gals.
Love you, Jack. Thank you.
And
Thank you,
gals.
Jack.
Thanks, Jack.
See you around campus.
Thanks, everybody.
As the world spins. That's our soap opera. What was the other thing on as the world turns? Yeah. So it's as the world spins. As my brain spins. See y'all.
Have a great Sunday. Thank you.
You too.
Everybody.
Thanks for being here, each and all.
Thank you so much.